What is going on, guys? It's Jono, and today we're going to be talking about inline functions in make.com. It is probably one of the most powerful features in the software that you can use. This literally converted me from a loyal Zapier subscriber into a loyal make.com subscriber. Let's dive in and take a look at what this looks like. So in front of me, I have a blank scenario. I'm going to click on Tools, and what we want to do is just really quickly set up multiple variables here, add an item, or we're going to select any of the fields. Now, you can see all of these functions that are available to you. You have general functions here. If you go over to the next tab, math functions, text and binary functions, you have calendar or date and time functions, array and collection functions here. And then you also have custom functions for your workflow scenarios, make.com and all that kind of stuff. And this is game changing. At least it was for me. And honestly, I use inline functions all the time, really all the time. I don't want to put an exact number to it, but I feel like almost a significant portion of the fields that I put in make use of an inline function. The cool thing is like something like Zapier, right? If you're to do an inline function, it would take you one module, but in make.com, you could do 1,000. Obviously that's a gross exaggeration, but you could do like 1,000 different inline functions in just one module, like set multiple variables. So you can have one set multiple variable, have 100 variables you set, and have different inline functions for every single one of the variables you define, which I've done in the past before. So it's super, super great. And we're going to be covering every single one. The blueprints are down below if you want to download them for free and walk along with me in this module. You can come over to these three buttons here and import the blueprint straight in, and you can walk along. Now, for the purpose of today's video, we're going to be generating JSON data straight from ChatGPT, and we're going to be using it here, and that's also going to be down below as well. We're going to go back into the scenario, and we're actually going to have a different starting point, which will not be the tools. So we're going to add a module here, and this module is going to be JSON, okay? And we're just going to parse JSON, and it'll come up with this error, right? So prior to configuring the module, you need to make sure it's connected to the scenario first. We're going to switch the trigger over here, and we're going to receive two errors. The first one is we just want to dump the JSON in here. We're going to add in an array here to make sure the JSON data is wrapped around an array, and then we're going to click OK. And it's going to give us one more warning because it doesn't like transformers, which is what the JSON module is here. It doesn't want it to be at the end. We're going to go ahead and ignore those warnings and run it anyways. And we have a bundle here, right? So you can see we have clients. We have 5 specific clients here. First one is John Doe. Second one is Jane. Third one is Bob Johnson. Fourth one is Alice, and then we have a repeat of Jane Smith because we're going to deduplicate this later on as one of the functions. Okay, so that seems pretty cool so far. I'm going to connect these back in, and we're actually going to start going one after another through all of these different functions here. Okay, so the first thing is that I'm actually going to start with the math functions just because it's a bit simpler. We're going to skip over average for now and come back to it. And we'll start with Ceil, okay? So what Ceil does is it's going to take a number and it's going to lift it up to the highest integer. So if you have 1.2 here, for example, right? And I'm just actually going to name this Ceil and paste this down here. This will actually move the number up to the highest integer, which would be 2 here, right? So if it's 1.1, 1.2, 1.9, every single time you run it, it will return a 2, right? So it's just moving the number up to the highest point or the highest integer. And in the exact opposite, we can also do something like the floor, which is really moving that number down to the bottom here. So if we do floor 1.9, it's going to move it down as a number to a 1, right? So now we have the floor being 1. So even, if it was 2.1 all the way to 2.9, it's just going to move it down to the lowest integer. The next one that we can do in math is we can do the max value here, which is going to be, we're going to have to pass in an array of values, right? An array is just a fancy way of saying a list. Now, how we're going to do that is we're actually going to add another module in here. And this module is going to be a simple array. So we're going to go back to JSON and we're going to create another JSON. We'll come back to this in a bit here. And we're just going to add a new structure and we're going to add items, and it's just going to be an array. And we're going to choose array here. And this is going to be a simple array of numbers. We'll click save here, click OK, and open this back up, and we can just add multiple different items in here or numbers. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have an array of 5 numbers. The first number is 1, the last number is 5, so it's every single number in a row. And we'll come back in here and do the max value. And it's going to pull out the max value here. So max value of this particular array, we're just passing in this JSON string here. And oops, we just need to do one more thing here, and we need to parse this JSON. So we're going to parse the JSON from this module first, just because it's not going to allow JSON here. And we'll return that here. So I'm going to run the scenario. It's going to throw an error. Actually, no, it won't. And we're going to pass in that parsed information in step 4 here. So we have this array. You can see all of the numbers here. It's just showing the first result, but that would be an array of 5 numbers. And we'll run this. And when we look at the max value, it's going to take the top number, right? So 5 is the highest number in that array of numbers from 1 to 5. And just remember, an array is just a fancy way of saying a list. So it's going to take the max value. Similarly, we can also take the lowest value as well using the min value here. So we'll take min value and we'll put in min value and we'll pass in the same array here, okay? And we'll click run again. And once again, we have, okay, so it says infinity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that actually didn't work. And that's because I misplaced the array outside of the min value range. So we're just going to pop it right in between these two brackets here and run. And it should return 1. Okay, perfect. So that's how you can get max ranges. And that's also how you can get min ranges as well. Moving on to the next math equation here. Let's take a look and see what it is. We have round, right? So this is going to round to 2 decimal points. So let's say we have a number like that. We can simply round it to 2 decimal points. So if we run the scenario, we'll take a look at the results here. And it actually rounded to 1 decimal point, or 0 decimal points. My apologies. It rounded into the closest integer. Now, let's say, for example, we actually want this to round to 2 decimal points. Well, we can actually easily do that with this round function. And what we need to do is we need to multiply it by 100 and then divide it by 100 if we want 2 decimal points. If we just want 1 decimal point, we'd multiply it by 10 and divide it by 10. And the reason why is because by default, this round function rounds the closest integer. So what we want to do is we want to take an integer, right, but multiply that by 100 for 2 decimal points, right? So let's say the integer is 1. In this case, if we multiplied it by 100, it would be 100. And then we divide it by 100 as well, right? Which would give us the exact decimal points that we're looking for, which would be 1.41. So let's go ahead and try this out. So in the round function here, we're going to times this, and you have to use this operator here. You can't just put in like a star here. The star is not going to do anything. So they have special operators in make.com to denote things like multiplication or division, so on and so forth. And we'll times that by 100, and then we'll also divide that by 100 as well. We'll run the module again, and this should get us to 2 decimal points. Right? So that's pretty cool. We have 1.41. If we wanted to get it to 1 decimal point, we could just remove one of the zeros on there. And this time it'll round it to 1.4. Cool. So we'll move on to the next equation here. So this one is going to be the sum, right? So we can sum all of the numbers together. And let's go back to that array here and let's add that in here. So we'll pass in the array of 5 numbers from 1 to 5, and we'll click OK here, and we can run that. And let's see the results here. So it's going to sum all of those numbers together. So it gave us a total, which is 15, which is awesome. And we don't just have to, there's a lot of other things we can do with that array too. We're going to circle back to the average function here as well, which I skipped over at the beginning here. Oops. And we'll paste that array in again. And yeah, so we can, oh, oops. I pasted the array outside of the brackets. Again, I swear this is like the only time I've ever done that before. That's funny. We'll run it again, and it's giving us the average, which is 3, right? So the average of all the numbers between 1 and 5 together is 3, so that's pretty cool. We'll go on to the next inline function here. And we have parse number. So what parse number means is that it's essentially parsing or removing that number from a text field. So what can happen a lot of the times is when you're formatting information, there's a lot of different ways to format information, right? It could be text, right? It could be a number. It could be an array, which is like a list, right? It could be true or false Boolean. And sometimes numbers get miscategorized as text, right? But you can't multiply text together, right? So even if it's a number, but it's still in text, you can't multiply it together. So what parsing does is it removes the number from the text, it converts it from a text object into a numbered object. And then with that numbered object, you can perform mathematics on it, right? So that's essentially what it is it's just appropriately classifying the object type. So we'll go ahead and parse a number, and we could just put in 2 here. And then it also has another field here where if you want to denote things like, I think it's the decimal point, right? So we have, let's just put in a number here. And then we'll put the decimal point as a comma here. We'll title this parse number. We can go ahead and run that. And it's going to give us this number now as a number that we can use for multiplication purposes. So that's really powerful to be able to pull out a number, right? And the last one, I think in the math section here, could be wrong, is formatting a number. Right? So with formatting a number, and I'm just going to title this format number. Essentially what happens here is that maybe, for some people, they might put like 1000 with a decimal in between the 1000 mark, right? Or maybe they put a comma, or maybe they don't put anything, right? But formatting the number just allows you to format it or structure it so that it looks the way you want it to look. So in the first position, you put the number, and then with the second position, you put the amount of decimal points you want, and then the decimal separator that you want it to be, as well as the thousandth separator as well. So like when it reaches 1,000, what do you want to denote that 1,000 mark, right? So typically speaking, I like to round it to 2 decimal points. And then for the actual decimal point, I want a period. And then for the 1,000th mark, I want a comma here, right? And we can click OK, and we'll run this again. And now it gave us a nice, beautiful number, 2 decimal points, and it put a comma between the 1,000th mark there, and then the period that denotes the decimals. Awesome. So that is the functions for math, but I'm just going to take it one step further here and kind of go over a lot of these operators too. So you could perform math in line with make.com. So you could do 2 times 10. And instead of putting the actual multiplication, you can do times 10. And then you could also divide that by 4. And we can click OK. And oops. Just going to zoom out a bit here. We'll run it, and it'll give us the answer here. So the number is 5, right? And then we could also add onto that. Maybe we want to add 20 and then minus by 5 or 3, let's say, and we can go ahead and perform math, right? So inline math functionality, super powerful stuff. If you guys aren't using this already, I'm sure as soon as you know how to do this, you're going to be using it all the time. I use it quite frequently myself. So that's powerful. And then you can also have these other, let's just go back into it. You also have these greater than or less than or greater or equal to or so on and so forth, right? And these are really powerful when you're combining them with if or else statements. Before we do that, I just want to cover this modulo. I don't know if I pronounced that properly. This is pretty rare. I almost never use this, but I'll just show you guys what this means. So let's just say we're dividing 25 by 7, right? What's going to happen with the modulo is it's going to take the remainder of the numbers left. So 7 can go into 25 3 times, right? And then that will go 7 plus 7 plus 7 will equal 21. And then there will be 4 left, right? So what the modulo does is it takes the remaining amount. So instead of putting the divide by, we'll put the mod in between 25 and 7, click OK. And when we run this, it's going to take the remainder left over, which is the 4. So that's pretty cool. And just last couple things here is if you want to add in pi, right? You can get pi. I've never used this. I think it's fluff. And then random number is just something random between 1 and 0. So if you guys want to throw in a random number here, you can. This is nice if you maybe want to split test things and you just want to randomize it so that 50% of the time it goes down path A, 50% of the time it goes down path B. And you can go ahead and do that, right? So we'll just run this one more time. And we got random number here and pi. Okay, cool. So we're going to move on here and we're actually going to go into the general functions now. And we're going to do a hybrid between these greater than, less than, equal to. And we'll also cover that with if statements here, right? So we'll do if statement. And let's say that you're with an if statement, what essentially happens is it's a conditional logic statement. So you're trying to decide which path to go down. And in make.com, you can go down 2 paths, right? So for example, if the client is named John Doe, you go down path A. If client is not named John Doe, then you go down path B, right? So it's just checking the value of a variable. And if it matches a particular condition, then it goes down path A. And if it doesn't match that condition or it's false, then it goes down path B. So if we come back into make.com here and we set this up, what we could do is we could be like, is 2, for example, greater than or equal to 1? And then if so, then I want you to list A. And if it's not, then I want you to list B. We're going to run this step once and come back in here and it returns A. And the reason it returns A, of course, is because 2 is greater than 1, right? And it's also not equal to 1 either. So because it's greater than 1, it's going to go down path B. Now, if I put 0 here and I clicked OK, then it should run down path B here. And that's how you can easily do inline conditional logic. Now, the cool thing about this as well is that you can actually nest inline logic further down the chain. So you could do another nested if or else statement within an if statement, right? So then again, we could do this and we could say if 2 is greater than 1, then go down path C. We'll do B. If not, we'll go down path C here, right? And this can keep going down and down and down. And, you know, I do this not super often, but this is definitely helpful. So it went down path B there, which means that, you know, 0 is less than 1 and 2 is greater than 1. So it didn't meet the first criteria to pass for A, but it did meet the second criteria, so it went down path B. So that's kind of how you can use greater than or equal to or less than and equal to and all of that kind of stuff, right? And if or else statements I use all the time. Super powerful stuff. Super, super nice that it's also inline as well. Okay, cool. And the next thing is if empty. So for example, in this, what's going to happen is we're just going to check to see if something is actually there, right? So you're going to check a string of text. And if that string of text contains something, then it will paste what that string of text is. Otherwise, it's going to have like a fallback value, right? So for example, if empty A equals B, if there's A here, it will run, right? So it's going to run because there was a value in this section here. Oops. So because there was an A here, it's going to run. But for example, if we paste in here null, right? Or better yet, maybe if we come back in here and we paste empty string, right? Denoting that it's an empty string in that field, and we run it, Oh, this is taking a bit longer than I was expecting. Okay, cool. If we run it, then it's going to go down path B because it's technically empty. So this is a great way you can have fallback values in make.com so that if something isn't exactly there, you can always replace it with something else in case. Cool. And the next one that I want to cover here is a switch statement. So a switch statement is essentially you're evaluating an option, right? And you're trying to find something to match it to. So for example, let's say you're comparing ages, right, of John Smith, right? And maybe you have age 40, but in numbers, and you want to convert that into 40 as in spelling, right? And then maybe you have 32 and 33 and 34 and 35 and 36 and 37. So you're finding his age and you're converting it from a number into text, right? You can easily do that with a switch statement. So let's go ahead and we're going to use John Smith's age here. So we'll put in clients here and age, right? And we'll do the first thing is 30 and we'll write it down as 30. And then we'll space it out again. And just so you guys are aware how this works, because it can get a bit messy here with so many values, what happens is that it looks for the first value. And if it matches, then it pastes the second value. If the first value doesn't match, then it skips over the first and the second value, and then it goes to the next value here. And we can do 31 here, and then we could do 31, for example. And then we could do 32, and then we could do 32, right? We'll go ahead and run this and it should match with 32 here. Okay, it says missing value required, parameter name. So let's just go down and see. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna paste this down because I pasted the value in the name, and we'll just title this switch statement here. Click OK and run this one more time. And it gave us an empty field here. So let's just take a quick look and see what happened. So we can take a look at the input statements here. And so I'm just going to switch back, and instead of using this field down here, this variable for age, I'm just going to put in like hard coding a value in here for 32, just so you can kind of see what this looks like. And we're going to run this once, and it's going to list out switch as 32 down below. And the reason why is we have the value that we're comparing, and we're going through the options. Is 32 equal 30? No. So we're going to skip over 1 and 2. Does it equal 31? No. So we're going to skip over 1 and 2. But does it equal 32? And the answer is yes. So it posts 32 down below. Okay, awesome. And on to the next one, we have omit and pick, right? And these are very similar, so I'll actually just cover these at the same time here. So with omit and pick, what we can do here is we're grabbing an object, and with that object, we want to be able to either in omit's case, we just remove certain values, or pick, we're just choosing certain values that we want to continue the workflow with, right? So for example, if we parse this JSON data here, maybe what we want to do is we only want to continue with address, right? So we get the person's address, but we omit maybe their hobbies, and vice versa. Maybe we want to pick the address and the age and continue on with that. So we can simply do that. How we're going to go about doing this is we're going to select the variable value here. It's going to be clients, and oops, I need to add in the omit section here and also the pick section here. And with omit, we're going to, well, I guess for both of them, we're going to add in the client, and maybe we want to omit the address here, and we want to omit hobbies. And for this, we only want the address. We'll click OK, and we'll run this. We just need to go back in here and actually change this, because right now what's happening is we're trying to omit something from an array, but what we can only do is omit something from an object. So I'm going to show you what that means right now. Essentially, what we have to do is come back in here, and instead of choosing clients, we have to choose an object like address, and then we can remove something like, for example, street. Let's just open this object up, and we have street here, right? And for pick, maybe we want to do the same thing, and we want to just take in the street we just want to pick out that street address, and that's it, right? So we can go ahead and choose street, click OK, run this, and let's explain what this is doing here. So with the omit value, we have city and zip code, and with the pick, we have street, right? But the original bundle here, let's just go into John Smith here, had an address with city, street, and zip code, right? So what this is effectively doing is it's omitting certain values here, right? It's omitting street, so we're only left with city and zip code. But with the pick option, you're essentially only selecting what you want here, right? Which is the street, so we get the street. So think about the pick option as working from top or bottom up, and then the omit option is working top down, right? So you're kind of carving away with the omit option to the result that you want. And with pick, you're starting brand new and you're just choosing all the different key value pairs that you actually want in your final object when you run it through the pick function. And specifically, if we just kind of take a look at this output here, we have like a client object, which is everything in between these curly braces here, and an array is an array, which is a list, right, of all the clients here, right? So we have a list of Jane, and we have a list of Alice, and we have a list of Bob, and we have a list of Jane again, and then John. We have Jane twice as a duplicate there on purpose. And in between the array of all these, we have an array of what is considered an object, and the object is denoted by the curly braces. An object in this case is just an object, a client, right? So the first object is John Doe, and you have information about him, and this we're working through the object here, which is address, right? And we're just using this to kind of omit and pick certain information. Okay, beautiful. So we're going to move on to the next part here, and up next we have the get option here. So get is super powerful. What the get does is it fetches information from something nested further down, either in an array or an object, right? So if we just put the get here, right, and we enter in the particular array here, what we may want to grab is, for example, the name. So we can title a name here, and we can grab that name from the client. We'll go ahead and run, and we came up with empty here. So the reason why it came up empty there is because we actually have to go one.name to grab the correct person that we're looking for. We'll run it again, and now we have John Doe. The reason why it's happening is in the client object, we have 5 different people, so we have to reference who it is that we're looking to grab. In this case, we're looking to grab person 1, right? We could also grab the second person down here, such as number 2, click OK, and run again, and it'll get the second person's name, which is Jane Smith. Maybe we want to grab something further down the chain with Jane Smith. Maybe what we want to do is we want to grab her address instead. So we could do 2 dot address dot, and we could do street here, and we could go ahead and pull out our street. This should work. Let's take a look. And we just pulled out Jane's street right here. So that's really powerful stuff. Okay, cool. And moving on here past the get function, we're going to add another variable here. And let's take a look what's next. We have these brackets here, which groups expressions together so that we can, understand what operation should be happening before, other operations. So for example, if we were to do math here, right? So let's say we do 1 plus 2 divided by 2. What's going to happen is division always happens before addition, right? So if we just run this like we could right now, and we'll just do math here, what's going to be the outcome is it's going to, let's actually just do like 10 here. It's going to do the division before it does the addition here. So the result is going to be 6, but maybe instead what we want is to make sure that the multiplication happens before the division. What we can do is we can wrap the multiplication in brackets. Oops, that didn't paste properly. And then from there, once this expression has been completed, then we'll divide it by 2. So it'll be 11 divided by 2 this time, which will give us a different answer. Instead of 6, it'll be 5.5. Okay, Awesome. Coming back into the list of values here, and we have operators, right? So equals, this is not equal to, right? Exclamation, equal sign is not equal to, and or. And then we also have keywords down here: true, false, ignore, null, and erase. So these are really, really beneficial when we're talking about if or else statements, or we're trying to run conditional logic. So for example, in an if or else statement, maybe we want to see, does 1 equal 1, right? Very similar to these operators down here. Is 1 greater than or equal to 1? We can run does 1 equal 1? And then if that's true, then we'll run A. And then if it's false, then we'll run B. And of course, I'm just going to copy this down here, and we'll do operators here and run this. And we can see the result that it ran through path A because 1 equals 1, right? And similarly, we could do the next operator here, which is, does it not equal that? And this will run path B, right? So now we're running path B, which is cool. And we also have or statements as well, and. So for example, let's say that let's say we want to get it down path A here, right? And right now it's running down path B. We could say, for example, or, and then we could do another conditional statement. So how the and or operators work is that first we're going to verify the first scenario to see if it's right. And in the or statement, either 1 or option 2 has to be right. If either of them are right, it'll go down path A. But if both are wrong, then it'll go down path B. If both are right, it'll go down path A. If one is right, it'll go down path A. Or if both are wrong, it'll go down path B, right? So let's, for example, say that this path is wrong, but 1 equals 1. It'll go down path A. So let's try this out. And it went down path A there, right? Now let's take the same or operator and let's put and on it instead. So now in this instance, both of these conditions have to be true, right? Both the first condition, 1 does not equal 1, and 1 equals 1 has to be true for it to run down path A, or it'll run down path B. And obviously it's going to run down path B. So that doesn't work, right? So that's how you can have very complicated and nested equations or conditional statements straight in line, right? Once again, if you're to use another platform, this might take you like 3 or 4 steps potentially just to get to this complexity of if or else statements, right? But in make.com, you can like literally do it in line with one function at any point in time, right? So it's super powerful stuff, super, super, super powerful stuff. And let's cover the keywords here for a second. So the main thing with these keywords is like, you know, true is also, you could just write true here, right? But the problem is that when make.com reads these, your true is not actually listed as true. It's a different object type. Your true, when you type it here, like what's highlighted, is a string object, right? So you can write string true, but it doesn't mean that make.com is going to read it as a true, right? So why this is powerful is because this plays into operators in these inline functions. And if you need a result to equal true, right? You're going to have to use these keywords. So let me give an example here because this is a bit complicated to say. So let's start this function over again. And let's say we have an if or else statement here, right? And we're trying to compare a certain value and see if it contains something. So we're going to go into the text and binary functions and we're going to have contains, right? And we're going to see if the phrase hello world contains the word world, which it does. Right? And the contains inline function is going to return true or false. So this is going to be true in this case, right? So if we have this equal to true here, then we want to go down path A. If not, we go down path B. We can run this, and because it equals true, it goes down path A. But if we were just to, for example, let's say put in path true here, let's just take a look here and hard code true in here and run it again. it's going to go down path B, right? Because this is a string, right? And this is a Boolean function, and it's built into make.com to specifically reference in conditional logic whether something's true or whether something's false, right? So this is to use specifically for your inline functions to get to a particular result, right? So you have true, you have false, you can ignore something completely, you can mark it as null, or you can erase it. I personally have never used erase. Null just means it's going to be an empty value, and then ignore just means that you're going to essentially ignore it. Now these are pretty, ignore is, I don't use too often, but I use true and false quite frequently, and null just returns an empty value, which I use quite frequently as well. So that is how you can use these keywords in make.com, right? Now we're going to move over to text and binary functions, and we're going to start this. We're going to move on to the next one down here. So we have length, right? And what length does is it just measures the length of a sentence. So if I put in my full name here, and I'm just going to title this as length and paste it down here and click OK, what's going to happen is when we run it, we're going to get a length of 12 characters, right? So this is 12 characters in total, my entire name. So if we just double check this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So it's counting up how many characters there are in my name. Okay, awesome. And the next one is going to be lowercase, and we're going to combine a bunch of these together. So we're going to do different cases, and we're going to do lowercase, and then we're going to do capitalize, and then we're going to do start case, and then we're also going to do uppercase as well. And I'm just going to paste in my name to every single one of these, just so you guys can kind of take a look and see what this looks like. Okay, so lowercase, Jono Catliffe, capitalized case, Jono Catliffe, start case, Jono Catliffe, and uppercase, Jono Catliffe. Click OK and run. And it's going to change the different capitalization frequency of my name. So in lowercase, it will change everything to Jono Catliffe, lowercase. In capitalize, it's going to start by capitalizing both the first and the first letter of every single word. In start case, it should only capitalize the first, but because I capitalized the C here, it remained capitalized. And then Jono Catliffe is uppercase. So what we can do is come back in here and just trust this start case out again. We're going to lowercase my name here and lowercase my name there and run it one more time just to see the results here. And you can see that it increased this to a capitalized letter there. And that was, let's just take a look here and see, and that was start case, right? That's going to start every single word off with a capital letter. Okay, so tons of different ways that you can change the different capitalization of words using make.com. Okay, and I'm also going to cover ASCII. Now, I've personally never used this before. Really, other than just learning really quickly what it does. But let's just type in cafe in French. And what we're going to do is we're going to get this word here. And essentially what we're doing is this is converting text, especially from like different languages, into like 100. I think it is 128 cases or 128 characters that you can have. And if it doesn't have that case, or if it doesn't have that character, it's going to remove it from the word entirely. So if we come back in here, you can see that ASCII, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly, but it removed the E there, right? Now, let's say you want to convert that E into just like a regular E, for example. What you could do is you could have another value that you're entering into this. What we need to do is separate it by a semicolon here. And then we're just going to add truth or true in here. And you can kind of see it in the example there, run it, and it's going to convert that E into just a regular English E, right? So that's how you can convert text from other languages and all that kind of stuff and formats into your standard letters and all that kind of stuff. I, once again, have never used that, and I probably never will. And on to the next thing here, we have replace, right? This is quite handy. So what we could do here is I'm just going to put in my name here. Oops, this is going to be replace, and I'm going to put in my name here, Jono Catliffe, and I'm going to replace Jono with Jonathan. And click OK and run this, and here we go. It's changed my my name from Jono to Jonathan. Okay, cool. And that's pretty handy if you want to replace certain values in text really, really easily in line with make.com. Cool. Trim is going to remove any white space in a string, right? So let's say we have tons of white space here and it says hello world and tons of white space afterwards too. What we can do is use the trim function, and it's going to remove all of that white space. So it just brings it down to hello world. Looks like I misspelled hello there. Okay, hell world. Let's go with hello world. Okay, perfect. So that is the trim function in make.com. And then next we have substring, right? So substring is to shorten a word, right? So let's just say we have hello and we put 0 and 3. It's going to take the first 3 characters of the substring. This is really common for things where you need to truncate or shorten that that text or that string. Think about like a tweet, right? Where the cap is 280 characters. You probably don't want to be sending something into Twitter that has like 600 characters, right? So you'd want to truncate it at maybe like 250, and then you'd put like at the end, be like, click here to read more, right? So you can just cut off the text if it goes past a certain character limit, and then you can say, hey, here's a link if you want to read more about what we're talking about. So that's pretty powerful stuff in and of itself. And you can see, yeah, just cut it off at 3 characters there with the substring. Okay, cool. On to the next thing here. We're going to move on to, to index of. So this is going to pull out the index of a particular character. Now, let's just say, we can actually just use the example here. So we can say internet, and then we want to pull out the T here, right? If you pull out the T, it's going to say, hey, you know, this is at position 2, right? And the reason why it's 2, by the way, and you're probably looking at being like internet, right? The T is at position 3. Anytime you're dealing with numbering arrays or lists in code, it always starts at 0 and then it goes up. So it doesn't start at 1, it starts at 0. And if we count up internet, the T is at 2. So we'll go ahead and paste this in here, and we'll pull out the T. And also you can see here, if you enter in something else that doesn't exist, it's going to put -1, right? So anytime you enter something in and it cannot find that particular character or that string in the text, it's going to return a -1. And you can also do like internet here, and it will also return at the beginning at the T, right? So this will be index of. Okay, cool. We'll run this and it'll return a 2, right? Once again, when you're doing lists, it starts at 0, then 1, then 2. When it comes to things like indexes. Okay, cool. And on to the next one here, we have ToBinary. I'm going to skip over this and come back to it later on, just because this I've never used and I probably never will use it. ToString is if you want to convert something like, for example, a number to a string or a Boolean to a string, right? So you could come in and do that. So for example, here, you could do 40 or 32, and this is going to convert it from text into a string, right? So ToString, we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, and it came out with, now this is not a number anymore. This is actually a string of text. Now you can also do this with other things as well. So maybe, you know, for example, you want to put in the true operator here, or the keyword, you could do that, and it'll also convert this into a string of text as well. So there you go. We can convert the true into a string of text as well. Okay, cool. We're going to add another item here further down the list, encoding URL. So let's say, for example, we want to change a string into something that we could use in a URL. We could do that easily. So encode URL, and we'll paste this down here and say, this is a string of text. It's going to convert all of these spaces into what would be appropriate for your URL. So if somebody visits that, they would actually go to that particular page here, right? So we can click OK, run this once, and now you're going to see the output be like this. Percentage 20 is percentage 20, a percentage 20, and all these special characters, it's going to convert into an encoded URL format so that when you go to that URL, it's going to work in your browser, right? So you could, for example, go like google.com/this, and this isn't going to return anything, but that's kind of the format for a URL. And this is really powerful stuff if you are having to create URLs straight from within make.com, which I've done quite a few times. So that's pretty powerful stuff. We'll copy this and we'll go to the next step here as well, which is decoding a URL. And we'll paste in the value that we just got from above. So decoding a URL, and we'll paste that in. And this is going to return that string of text again. So this is a string of text. One more time. Awesome. So that's how you can easily work with URLs in make.com to kind of go back and forth and get the desired outcome that you want, whether you have to convert something into a URL and then afterwards you want to remove it or vice versa. It's super easy to do. Okay, cool. And then we have escape HTML, which is just removing the HTML tags, but it's kind of putting it into a different format here. And that is actually called HTML entities, right? So you can change kind of the formatting here. So same kind of thing with escape markdown and strip HTML. You can strip HTML straight from the text there, right? So if you typed in hello here with the BR, it's just going to return hello. Escape markdown, you can remove markdown, right? And kind of get it into markdown, I think, entities as well. And those are pretty powerful things. So we'll do all of these together, and we'll just title this HTML/markdown, and we'll just do one after the next. So what we're going to start with is the escape HTML, and we'll just put in like H1 here, hello world. And then we'll do an H1 there. Next one, we're going to do escape markdown. So maybe we have like a second heading here, and this is a heading. And then we have strip HTML. So maybe we have an LD or a listed component, and we're going to remove this as well, hello world. And we can try this out. Oops, I'm going to zoom out here a bit and run this scenario. Okay, awesome. So you can see that it changed all of the different tags here. So it removed it to HTML entities here. And I think this is markdown entities as well. And then this just strips the HTML completely so that there is nothing, right? So I personally don't use like the HTML entities or the markdown entities. I just think it's kind of a waste. I've never used it. I never will likely use it. But the stripping HTML I use pretty, not like super frequently, but enough that it's definitely valuable. So that's cool. Okay, cool. And just a couple last ones here, contain and also split. So we'll use these as well. So contain is going to provide a true or a false value. So contains, and we'll just run through this. And maybe what we'll do is we'll provide an array here. So you can provide text too, but in this case, we're just going to provide an array. And we're going to say, does it contain 2? And if the answer is yes, then it'll be true. If not, it'll be false. So in this case, it does contain the number 2. So it returned true. So anytime you're dealing with contains, it's only going to return a Boolean value. And Boolean values have 2 options, true or false. And that's it, right? There's nothing else that is going to come about it. But it's super helpful. And the contain, I find that, like, personally, I use it all the time when I'm trying to render it in an if or else statement, right? So I'll have an if or else statement, and I'll try and understand, does some array or does some text contain this word or this value or whatever? And if the answer is true, then you go down path A. And then if it doesn't, then you go down path B. And that's really where it comes into effect, is when you pair it up with the if-else statements, because you can get really great results that way with it. The last thing here is split that we're going to be covering in the inline functions here. So split is going to split text by a particular value here. Now, we want to split this by the space, right, to get my name between the two. But the thing is this isn't going to work actually, because I'm using the space bar, right? But I should be using the inline space keyword here, right? So this is kind of where keywords come in once more, is if you want to have something like split and you want to make sure it splits by something like the space, you need to put in the space keyword here. Or if you want to split it by new line, you need to make sure it's new line, or tab, put the tab there, or whatever it may be, right? So this is where the keywords really come into effect, because those keywords are how you pass in the logic that you're looking for when you're using inline functions, like splitting by space or so on and so forth. So we'll click OK, and we'll run this again, and it should work this time, and it's going to return an array of two values, one for my first name and one for my last name. Okay, cool. So that is pretty much all of the text values broken down in make.com, or sorry, the text functions broken down. The only other thing that's worth mentioning here is a UUID. And what this is a universal unique identification code. And if we run this, it's going to provide you with a completely unique ID that will never be duplicated ever again, right? So that's pretty powerful stuff. If you need a unique field, you can just simply generate it straight in line with the UUID option there. Okay, cool. So that is everything up to text and binary. Actually, I just want to go over one more thing, because I skipped a few here. And what that is like MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to lump this into codes here, because I never use this, right? So I'll do binary here, and then I'll do MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, SHA-512, and then base 64. And I'm going to put test, the word test in all these, and it's just going to convert it into different codes, right? I've never used this personally, but that's what it does. And you can kind of see all the different values here listed, right? So if that's something that's important to you, then you can go ahead and convert it into different codes there, but I've never used them, and I probably also never will. I think it's more fluff than anything else. Awesome. So we're going to move on to the date and time functions in make.com. And yeah, let's go ahead and take care of that. So we can have a date picker here. So if you want, you can just choose a date and time, right? And it's going to essentially give you that exact time that you're looking for. So maybe you have the 22nd here, or the 23rd, and then you put the time and you switch it back and forth, right? And you can easily generate a time field there. That I've never used before, and I probably never will, just because that's not really that beneficial. I don't see how that would be beneficial to have a workflow always with the exact same time every single time, right? But maybe that is beneficial. Maybe you want a timestamp, or perhaps you want now. I use now all the time. It's one of the most frequently used things, or inline function kind of features that I use. I don't use timestamp at all. This is a hexacode or hex code, I think, but essentially it counts up the seconds from 1970, January 1st, and up until now, or whatever the time is. So you can see here that between like 1970s till now, there's been however many seconds, and then now is August 19th, 2024 at 10:57 a.m. So this is really great. And the reason why now is really, really great is because you can reference that in these inline functions when it comes to date and time. So for example, you can add time / subtract time, right? So I'm going to do this in bulk here just because this gets super, super repetitive. So add dates or seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and years. Okay, and I'm going to put in now for all of these. So we're going to compare this to now, right? So based on now, we're going to add seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years, or subtract it. And you can set however much you want, right? So maybe, for example, I'm just going to exit out of this because it seems to be getting in my way here. Maybe you want to, oops, just going to delete this. Maybe you want to add 32 seconds here. And maybe for minutes, you want to add 7 minutes. But for hours, you want to -6. For days, you want to do -2. Months, you want to do 14. And years, you want to do, I don't know, let's say -1, right? Click OK, run this, and it's going to give you a new date compared to now with those difference in seconds, right? So this is going back in time. And then this is actually, this is going back in time by quite a few minutes there as well. So you can see that, for example, this went back a year, right, to 2023, because we put it 14 months ahead. That will take it further a year. And then you can see the days have changed here and the hours have changed and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's how you can quickly add and subtract times from each other in make.com. And then you can take it a step further and compare those times too by multiplying or adding or subtracting those times as well. So let's go ahead and compare these dates, for example. So I'm actually just going to paste in the formula here, but we're going to do compare dates, and oops, and we'll just go ahead and paste this formula in. And date 1, let's just say it's now. And then date 2, let's just say it's, we're going to add, actually, hold on a second. We're going to do now at the end here, and then we're going to add minutes, and we're going to do now, and then we're going to add another 32 minutes. And this is going to tell the time between the two dates in minutes, right? So we'll run this again. And we have a comparison of 32 minutes in between the two dates. You can do this for seconds, minutes, dates, times, years, seconds, minutes, days, hours, days, months, years. Oh my God, I don't know why that was so freaking hard for me to say. But anyways, there is how you can compare dates in make.com, right? You're just going to have you're going to compare it by subtracting or plussing or whatever you want to do, but usually it's subtraction between two dates. And then you just need to round it and make sure that you're dividing by 1,000. And then you're also dividing by 60 seconds, or 60 seconds, and then 1,000 for the milliseconds as well. Okay. So we can go ahead and save that, and then we're going to move on to the next function here. And we're going to cover quite a few again simultaneously. And what we're going to be covering this time is these set seconds, setting hours, and so forth. So setting time, and we're just going to do all these together just because this is a bit repetitive. So set seconds, minutes, hours, days, date, month, year. And once again, we can just use now as a reference point. So we'll paste in now for all of these as a starting point, and then we'll just add additional time onto all of these. And what this is doing is it's taking the date you currently have, but it's just adjusting the current seconds or minutes or hours. So for example, let's say that currently it's 32 seconds into the minute. Well, I could just back this up to 13 seconds into the minute. And maybe, you know, right now we're at 10 minutes in here. I'm just going to change this to 9 minutes, right? And hours, I'm going to add another hour in here. So maybe I want to do 25 hours here instead. Or maybe I'll just do 4 hours and I'll do like 34 days. And this is actually going to skip over to the next month. And then we have set months. This could be 13. And then set year could also be like -2, right? So let's give that a try. And the only other thing that we're missing here is this is going to be days, right? And this is going to be something like the day of the week, right? So maybe we want to set it to, let's do Tuesday because it's currently Monday right now. So we can click OK. We're going to zoom out here, click OK, and then run this. And then we can see all the different dates that we have here, right? So the seconds we set to 13, and then we set the minutes back to 09 when it's currently right now 11. And then for the hours, we set to 11, and then we set this a day ahead here. And then we set this a month or so ahead, I believe, something like that. And then, yeah, we also changed the year as well here, right? So you can really just keep the months and the seconds and the hours and all that kind of stuff the same, but just change or manipulate one reference of time or one point in time as a reference, whether it's seconds, minutes, hours, and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. So that's how you can set particular time. I personally never use that. I don't really see the complete value in that, but that's just me personally. And then we have format date here, right? So with the formatting of a date, we can simply take an existing date and format it in whatever way that we want. So usually what I like to do, especially when I'm dumping things into Google Sheets and I want something that's a bit prettified, something that I can look at, it's easy on the eyes, I can register and understand immediately what it means. What I'd like to do is day, month, and then year. And if I click OK and I run this, instead of getting a jumbled date, it's just going to give me something really nice and easy, which that is definitely not really nice. And that's definitely not really easy. So let's go back to this and change that because I think I made a mistake. So we'll do day, and then month, and then year. So 2 Ds, 3 Ms, and 4 Ys. And we'll try it again. And now it's the 19th of August, 2024. So that's pretty nice to me. And the last thing here is going to be the parsing of dates. So parse dates. And this is nice because what this does is it changes a date from text into an actual date that you can work with, play around with, and change, right? So the problem is that in make.com, and when you kind of get your feet wet into coding and all that kind of stuff, there's different types of objects, right? There's strings, there's numbers, there's dates, there's Boolean, there's objects, arrays, which are lists, all of this kind of stuff, right? But if you have the wrong object type, you're not going to be able to effectively work with the property you're looking to work with. So a date only is powerful if it's a date field, right? That's I think mutable or changeable. But if you're working with a date that's structured as a text field, then it's not technically read by computers as a date, it's read as a string of text, right? And that's not good. So we have to convert that over into a date field, right? And how we do that is we just take a date and we parse it here, right? And we have to provide 2 values. The first is we have to provide the actual date, and then we have to provide the format of that date. So for example, if I did 2016-08-01, I could do year, and then month, and then day. And then this is going to transfer from text into a workable date that I can now use for additional functions as well, right? So for example, I could add on to that, right? So for example, I could change a parsed date now. And what we could do is go back into here, and then we could add hours, and we'll just use this as an example. And then we want to add 3 hours on top. We can click OK and now run that, and we can get a date that's completely different, right? So it started at 12 and now it's 3. So we've added 3 additional hours onto that. So that's super helpful. And you can see how functions can start off easy and then get progressively more complex as your requirements go up. So that effectively is everything that that has to do with dates here. And we can finally move on to the last type of inline functions in make.com. I guess technically not the last. We will cover the system variables and custom variables, but that's going to take 2 seconds. Now we're going to move on to arrays, right? And arrays are essentially lists, right? So it's just a glorified or a coding way of saying a list of items, right? So a common list could be like, think about an Instagram post and you have all these hashtags, right? So a list would be all of the hashtags, right? A more complicated list would be, think about a CRM and you run a business and you have multiple clients in that business, right? Every single client represents an object, and and as that object, multiple objects would be comprised into one list, which is an array, right? And an object is a client where it provides certain information about them: first name, last name, email, phone number, all of that kind of stuff, right? So now we're working with more complex data structures, and there are still inline functions that we can use to go through all of these different data types. So we'll start with join here. So I'm going to write that up top here. What join does is it essentially is going to take an array and it's going to concatenate is the technical word, but it's going to merge it into like a text field, right? So it's going to take a list of items and it's going to merge it into text. So for example, let's say that we want to join, and we're going to go back to our initial client object here. We want to join these hobbies together, right? So we want to join hiking and frequency together. So we'll just paste that in here. And it does sometimes want a second field, and this is to denote the separation between the two. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave the separator as nothing and run it. And let's see the results that it gets. So we have an object and we have an object. So obviously this is not ideal because that's not the result that we're looking for. So we'll come back in here and take a look and see what we did wrong here. Okay, so the issue that we encountered here is that we tried to run join over an array of objects, and with make.com, you can only run a join inline function over a primitive array. And what a primitive array is it's essentially just a very another way of saying a very basic array. So like an array of numbers, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all listed together, or an array of text. Think about like tags that you could add on to somebody, like VIP customer or high spending customer or return customer or whatever, right? So just primitive arrays are just simple arrays of text or numbers or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back in here. We're actually going to update the JSON that we have here. We're going to go under age here. We're going to copy and paste this in. We're just going to put tags, and then we're going to add a primitive array here of tag 1, tag 2, and tag 3. So we have this text over here, and we'll Command F all the rest of the ages and just add this for all the rest of the people in here. And we should be good to go. Sweet. We're going to run this once so we can collect the data back here. And in the join field, now we're going to use that text array. So if we come into clients and we use the tags array here, we run through this, it's going to concatenate or merge them all into the same field. So let's take a look at the results now. So we can see that it's joined the tags, tag 1, tag 2, tag 3, right? So that's pretty cool. It's just taking an array and it's merging it into a text field. Okay, awesome. So the next thing we're going to cover is we're going to add another item here, and we're going to go into the length field. So we can essentially gather how long the array is by how many items there are in it. So we can use that same array that we just used, which is the client tags array. So we'll copy this over, paste it down below here, and we'll title this length, and we'll paste the results back in here. And click run once, and we'll take a look and see the results. So let's just see if that actually worked, because I didn't see. Okay, so we have variable length here, and we'll run this one more time. Join, so it doesn't seem like it's appearing. And that is because I think we actually named this twice. So we have two length variables, so we'll call this array length. And let's underscore that and try this again. And come down here. So the array length is 3, right? So if we kind of look at the tags again, so we go into any of these individual people, there's 3 tags. Okay, perfect. So that is how we get the length of an array. And we'll move on to the next item here, which is the keys, right? So we can grab the keys. So I'm going to call this array keys. And we'll just put in a particular, we'll put in, I think, an object here. So returns an array of a given objects or array of properties. So we'll put in keys here, and the client we'll put in clients, and let's just give this a run and see if this works. All right, so we got array keys 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because essentially what it's denoting as the keys here is just, I guess, the position or the index of every single one of these items in that particular array. Now, if we put another value in here, we might be able to get the actual keys out. So we're going to put address of this client, and hopefully this should return more than just the index for the arrays. And now we can see the keys: street, city, zip code. So if we come back to the original client here, keys are essentially pulling out the key from an object, right? So every object has key value pairs. So the key is like what you're naming it, right? Like what it is that you're trying to reference. It's like the reference name, and then the value is the actual value. So if you think about like every client or every person in general, they're going to have an address, right? And that address is going to be a city and a zip code and a street. So everyone's going to have a street, city, and zip code, but the street, city, and zip code are going to change from person to person to person. So you can reference everyone's city by the city key, but the value for city is going to be different depending on which city you live in. So that's essentially how you can deal with keys in objects in make.com. So if you're interested in pulling that out, you can simply do that with the keys inline function there. I don't use it very often. I don't really find it super applicable, but if it is something you're interested in, of course you can get that. Okay, so the next thing is we can do slice, right? So what a slice does is think about an array of, array. You have, let's say, numbers 1 to 5. We're going to call this array slice here. You can essentially remove certain elements of the array. So maybe you only want the first item in the array, maybe you want the last, maybe you want the first 3, maybe you want the first 2. With this, you can put in the array and then the starting point and the ending point that you want to take information from. So in the slice object, we're going to go back to this array of numbers here, which I believe is right here. And we're going to put the starting point of 1 and the ending point of 3. And then we're going to run this and see how this works. So we'll come back and here's the array slice. So we put 1 and 3, right? So it returned 2 values to us. So we're taking 1 and then 2, and then it stops at 3, right? So when you put something at the end, it doesn't include that end, right? It stops at that. That's the cutoff point. So remember how objects will start at 0, or sorry, indexes of arrays will start at 0, and then they'll start 0, 1, 2, 3. So when we put in an index, when we put in an index of 1, in this case, it's actually going to be the value 2. And when we put in the index of 3, it's actually going to be the number 4, right? So we're taking 2 and 3 from it. So just remember that indexes always start at 0 and move up. That might be confusing if you're used to thinking of a list of something starting at a position of 1, which is how I think most people that don't know coding, and certainly how I viewed it before I learned coding, that's how I always viewed it too. So just always remember that principle and you should be fine. Okay, awesome. And the next thing that we're going to talk about here is going to be merge. So merge, you can just essentially add additional arrays together into one array, right? So we can merge arrays together. And let's say, for example, maybe what we want to do is we want to merge, and it's going to give us the ability to add 2 arrays. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to do this numbered array here. And then the second one we're going to do is we're going to merge the tags into it, right? So we have 2 things, merge tags, and we're also going to merge the numbers 1 to 5, and it should bring all of that together. Now we can see 2 arrays that have been now converged into 1, where we have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we also have tag 1, 2, and 3. You'll notice too, and I should have explained this a lot sooner, is that we have multiple clients, but it's only giving tag 1, 2, and 3. If you wanted to have if you wanted to iterate through all of these clients individually, you'd have to set up a process such as you'd have to essentially add an iterator through this. And what an iterator does, so if you just add a module here and you add flow control iterator, this would go through one client at a time, right? And then you pull out the tags from client 1. And then once the tags are pulled up from client 1, then it goes to client 2 and it'd pull out the tags from client 2. And then after client 2 is done, it would go to client 3 and pull out the tags from client 3, and so on and so forth, until the whole array of clients has been completed, right? It's from the first client all the way to the end. Okay, sweet. So we're going to come back down here and we're going to go on to the next item in the list. And this time we're going to be covering contains, right? So in contains, what we're trying to figure out is, does the array contain a certain value, right? And if it does, then it's going to return true. If it doesn't, it will return false. So in this particular instance, we're going to add in, just for simplicity, the array of numbers 1 through 5. And if it contains 6, it'll return true. If it doesn't, it'll return false. In this case, it should return false. But if we put in the number 2 in here, right, it will move forward with true. Right? So we'll run that one more time. And in this instance, it returns a value of true. So that is how you can check an array to see if it contains a value that you're looking for. So for example, maybe you're only wanting to continue forward if somebody has like a paid tag on them, right? You only want to continue a workflow if they're a paying customer and they're not just a lead that inquired 6 months ago or whatever, but they never paid and now they're still in your system or whatever. So that's an easy way that you can check by using the contain to run through all their tags and see, hey, has this person paid, for just as an example, right? But there's a million different use cases that you could have the contain function used for. Okay, perfect. The next one is going to be remove. So remove is just essentially removing something from a list, right? So you're going to remove a value specified in the parameters of an array. Right. So this is only going to work on, once again, primitive arrays. So primitive arrays are numbered arrays, they're text arrays, they're just really simple arrays that don't include things like objects, right? Objects are a bit more complicated. It would be easier to do if you're running JavaScript, but just because we're in make.com, it is a bit limited. Still significantly better than something like Zapier, but it is somewhat limited. So this can only work on very simple arrays. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the array remove function here. And I'm just going to go back into it and we're going to remove. Okay, perfect. And we will go into our simple function of numbers 1 to 5, and then we're going to remove 2, 3, and 4, and we're going to keep 1 and 5. We're going to click run here, and it should remove all of those numbers and just keep 1 and 5. There we go, right? So you can just add values that you'd not like to have in there. You can also, of course, map these values in. They don't have to be hard-coded. So if the values are changing over time or they're dynamic, you can just add whatever it is that you want in there. Similarly to removing, we can do array add, and it's the exact opposite. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to add values to it. So we're going to have our array, which is 1 to 5, and we're going to add 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we're going to run this, and it's going to concatenate onto the array or add onto the array so that it has another 4 values from 1 all the way up till 9. Okay, so that's how you can add information onto a simple array. The next thing we're going to do after adding is we're going to go back in and we're going to map. Now, map is very similar to the get function, right? So getting a certain object, but in this case, mapping is finding a sub array, right? So we're going to do array map, and what we're going to try and do is pull out an array here. So how we can do this is we can map and we'll pull in the client here. And then, for example, we can do tags, right? And this may or may not work. We might have to put the index of the client on there for it to work properly. But okay, so it seems like it worked, right? So we're mapping through all of the clients and we're getting all of those different tags for all of the different clients. And I did add, I probably should have switched them up so every client had slightly different tags, but yeah, that's how you can really simply pull out subarrays or sub values or whatever it is that you want from an array using the map function. Now, one more thing I want to add in for this map, because it can get way more granular and it can, it's way more useful than that, is let's say that we have, we don't want to just pull up the tags of everyone. Maybe we just want to pull up the tags of somebody who has the name of John Doe, for example, right? So we could say, for example, we want to pull out tags. So we're just going to name the key that we want to pull out. The key is tags, and then the values are tags 1, tags 2, tag 3, which is an array. And we're going to find that particular person based on the key name, and their name has to be John Doe. And as long as their name equals John Doe, then we're going to grab the tags from that particular client, right? We're going to run this, and it's going to iterate through all of the different clients. And as long as their name equals John Doe, then it's going to find the tags for that client. We'll go into array map. We'll pull out an array of all the tags 1, 2, and 3. And these are the tags for John Doe. So array mapping, super, super useful. And this is really nice to pull out nested fields that are kind of like submerged down the chain, which are usually hard to get at, but mapping makes it super easy. So that's why it's honestly one of the most powerful functions, inline functions that you can use in make.com. It's honestly, I think it's a lifesaver. Okay. Cool. So we'll move on to the next one here, which is shuffle. So shuffling is just going to randomly shuffle the array so that maybe John Doe comes up first the first time, and then it's Jane, and then it's Bob. But the next time, maybe it's Jane, then Bob, then John, right? Or maybe it's Bob, John, and Jane, right? It's just going to always shuffle and randomize the order of who comes up first. So we can come in here and add clients, and it should change the order of the clients that we receive. We'll go ahead and run that scenario, and let's take a look at what we get here. So shuffling, so now it's Jane Smith first, it's John Doe second, and then Jane Smith and Bob and Alice. So that's really cool, right? So we're gonna be able to shuffle things. I don't really use it super often. I don't really have a purpose for that, but that is something that maybe you potentially could find some value in. Okay, cool. So sort. Sort is how you can just essentially choose which person or which object comes first, right? So for example, in this, maybe we want to sort the clients based on the alphabetical order of their name. So we can put in clients, and then we can put name here, right? And based on whoever's name alphabetically comes up first, it's going to arrange that accordingly. So let's take a look at the results here. And we can see that we got a collection upon a collection upon a collection. So let's just take a look at the clients here, see what happened. And essentially, let me just see here. If we put a 1 here, let's just see. Oh, of course. Oh my gosh, same mistake like 3 times. I keep putting the value in the name. So we're gonna call this array sort and click OK and run this once. And now it should sort it properly. Okay, Alice first, and then afterwards Bob and Jane, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty useful, right? If you want to sort them alphabetically, and then maybe you can create a list, right? Where you just have all the clients' names from first to last, or maybe you sort by date, right? You sort by the first date, and then you go to the last date. And if you want, what you could do as well, if you want, what you could do as well is you could also sort and then reverse the sorting of what you just had. So maybe you, instead of sorting from, A to Z, maybe you want to sort from Z to A, right? So how you could do this is you could reverse that, right? And we could just reverse the sorting here and paste that in here. Don't worry, I'm not going to make the same mistake twice, or like the 16th time in a row by pasting this in the name column. We'll do reverse here. And click OK, run. And now it's going to sort, but Z to A. So John Doe first, Jane Smith second, Jane Smith is the duplicate, Bob, and then Alice. Whereas in this, we go Alice, we go Bob, Jane, so on and so forth. So that's also super useful as well, right? Okay, cool. On to the next inline function here. We're going to go into first. So what first does is it's going to pull out the first value in that particular array. So if we come down into clients here, actually, let's go into numbers. And this is just going to be a bit easier. So we're going to put first array. array first. Click OK. And this should pull out the first value, which in this case is the 1. So we should be left with only the 1, right? So in case you want to just pop off that first value in the array or first element, then you can do that. And similarly, if you want to do the opposite and you want to grab array last, you can do the inverse by selecting last and then putting in the same array here. So we're just going to copy this down and paste it in here. Sweet, click OK. And we'll run through that one more time. And this time we're going to get the last value in the array, which is a 5. Perfect. Okay, cool. Moving on to the next one. We're going to do flatten. Okay, so returns a new array with all subarray elements concatenated into it recursively. So this is just essentially pulling out an array below, right? So if we go flatten and we do contact client tags, oops, we'll just add the tags down here. Click OK, we run it. What this should do is pull it out. So we're pulling out another array for us to use that in. Okay, and also it's just important to note too with the flatten there, like it's not going to be super common that you use that in make.com. I think the main reason why you'd have flatten is for API usage. So if you're trying to connect with an external API and they have limits or requirements on how much data can pass through, or you have to essentially trim the payload so that it's smaller so that you can pass the data that you need through, then you'd flatten the array and you can recursively flatten it so that if you have an array of objects, you can remove things so that it's shorter. But to me, like personally, I've never used it. I probably will never use it. And for the majority of you watching it out there, you're probably not going to use it realistically either. The next one is distinct. This is super, this one's really nice to have. So with distinct, what it's going to do is it's going to remove all additional values from the array. So if we have 2 Janes, it should remove 1 so that we only have 1 Jane, not 2. So no duplicates when it comes to objects, right? So let's take a look at the array and see. Okay, so we have 5 here. And the reason why it didn't work, we just passed it in and nothing happened there, is because we need to pass in an external key so it knows, key and value, so it knows what to match the people on. So we need to find people with the same name. And if there's 2 people with duplicate names, then it will remove somebody from it. So we'll run it again. And this time it should have removed Jane. So we can now have 4 results here: Alice, Bob, Jane, and John. So that is how we can remove somebody out of an array. Awesome. Moving on to the next element here. We have deduplicate. Now, deduplicate is just slightly different, but essentially with deduplicate, instead of deduplicating an array of objects, so objects being client like Jane and John, it's a primitive array. It's like a text array. It's a numbered array, all of that kind of stuff, right? So we can deduplicate and we can pass in this array here, which is the text numbers 1 to 5. Just before we run this, I'm just going to add 2 more numbers here. So we're going to add 5, and then we're going to add 5, and then we're also going to add 4 as well. So we have a ton of duplicates here. We're going to click OK and run. And this is going to remove out all of those extra 4s and all of those extra 5s. When we take a look, we get back to the original values we had in the first place, 1 to 5. So that's how you can differentiate between deduplicate and also differentiate between distinct values in make.com. And we're approaching the end here. Let's move on to the next one. We have 2 collections. So what this is going to do is it's going to convert an array containing objects with key value pairs into a collection. And I'm actually going to skip over 2 collections. I've never used it before, and it seems broken to me every time I do try and use it. I just, it doesn't seem to work for me. Maybe you'll have better luck than I will, but yeah, I'm going to skip over that for now. And then we're going to go over to 2 array, and this is going to be the last kind of function that we cover in the arrays section here. And with ToArray, all we have to do is we just have to pass in an object, right? So an object is with key value pairs. An object in this case would be a client, right? So clients could be like, you know, their all of the client's information, first name, last name, email, phone number. In this case, I'm just going to use their address here, right? This is another object with street name and city and zip code and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to change it from an object into a array. So instead of it being a key value pair, now what it is it's changed into an array with 3 items in that array. And those all have particular, those are all 3 now collections within an array. And that's how you can convert things from an object into an array. Now, just the last little thing I want to mention here that's been super useful to me as well when it comes to arrays in array inline functions in make.com is if I want to create a new array from nothing, what you can do here is you can just, you can add different arrays here, right? So add values. So if you want, you can add a value here and you can start with an empty array and then you can add values into it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that can simply create an array for you too. So if that's something you're interested in doing, just really quickly, you can go ahead and generate an array just like that. Okay, cool. And lastly here, let's see, we're just going to go all the way down to the bottom here. And oh, you can see I actually made it a mistake, empty array. So let's just try that one more time. Empty array. Okay, sweet. So we have an empty, now we have an array of 1 to 5. We just added in the numbers 1 to 5. Awesome. And just tidying up here, that kind of covers everything to do with arrays. And then you also have these custom and system variables here. So I'm just going to label this custom and system variables, and you can essentially go through and identify all of these in your workflow. So if you want to know, like, for example, data consumed, you can just enter that in, execution ID, execution started at, execution. I'm just going to pause and fill the rest of these out. Okay, perfect. So we have all of the variables here. We can click OK and we can run this scenario and it's going to give us all the information that we want to know about that particular scenario, right? So how much data was consumed, execution ID, execution started at, execution type, execution URL, all of that kind of stuff. So once again, I've never used this, but if you're interested in getting certain things from make.com or that particular scenario, maybe that might be helpful. The only other thing that might be useful to know is how many operations were consumed, or maybe how much data is left in your account, all of that kind of stuff, so that you can make informed decisions on how you want to proceed with certain workflows and so on and so forth. So that is everything for this lesson today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did make it all the way to the end on inline functions in make.com, what a game-changing thing this was for me. It really allowed me to just accomplish so much more with automation. I mean, you really, once you know it, you really take it for granted, but like seriously, this stuff just doesn't exist in other platforms, right? Of course, you can learn code and you can do this with JavaScript or whatever language you're learning, but if you're not a coder and you want to automate, but still have the flexibility to be able to use such powerful tools in line at any moment in time, then make.com is such a game-changing software, and using these inline functions just takes it to the next level. And this, you know, is just one of my favorite features. So thank you guys once again. If you like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below. If you have future content ideas, make sure to post it down below as well. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thank you and bye-bye.